Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on consultative selling. As we are waiting for folks to join into our Zoom, please take a moment and enter into the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, and we hope you will continue to engage in the chat with us throughout our session today. Also, take note in the chat that you have the option of directing your message to the hosts and panelists, which would be Rhiannon and myself, or you can direct your chat to everyone. So just note that if you'd like to share your comments with the entire group, make sure to choose the everyone option. And welcome, Doug, from New Jersey. Glad to have you with us. Christy, yep, Richard's there. Jennifer, great, wonderful. Again, as you're joining, please feel free to let us know your name and where you're joining us from. And we're going to go ahead here and get started in just a moment. A couple of other housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and it will be sent out to everyone that registered. So as you're listening today, also know that you will get the option to have that recording after our session. And seeing Todd, Katrina, Jen, Diane, wonderful, welcome. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to go ahead and jump into the content. So again, today we are talking about consultative selling. And, what we're going to be talking about is really uncovering customer needs and wants, really being able to develop that trusted advisor relationship with your clients. We're going to talk about how to build confidence in sales interactions with your teams, especially for new sellers. And we're also going to be talking about best practices for rolling out a new training initiative. I am excited to introduce my co-host today, Rhiannon Knapp. She is the head of learning and development at Flow Control Group, a partner with the Brooks Group. Rhiannon has 20 years of experience in training and L&D. She's currently, as I said, the head of learning and development with Flow Control Group, where she spearheads training and organizational development programs for over 100 subsidiaries. In this role, she has launched the company's first succession planning initiative, coached over 200 executive leaders, designed custom training academies for sales enablement, C-suite executives, frontline managers, engineering, and technical service technicians. She's implemented the organization's first LMS, first performance management program, and built the organization's first workforce skills architecture from the ground up. Professionally, her greatest passion is developing and implementing programs that impact organizational growth. And we're going to talk about one of those programs today. I've had a blast working with her on this webinar. I know you all are going to get tons of value out of the insights that she's sharing. And Rhiannon, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. When you list out that bio, I feel like, wow, I gotten a lot done here at Flow Control Group so far. It's very gratifying. But I would say that, this sales partnership and doing consultative selling training at FCG has been one of the most impactful things that we've worked on. So I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Wonderful. We're excited. Again, as I said, we're excited to share those insights. You have such a compelling story to tell. Lots of best practices, some lessons learned, and we're just going to have a great conversation. So let's jump in. So Rhiannon, for those in our audience who are not familiar with Flow Control Group, tell us a little bit about your company, about the sales organization.
Yeah, so Flow Control Group, we call it FCG. FCG is a really partnership of about 100 subsidiaries, and we operate really in technically oriented products and services for flow control and industrial automation primarily. We have locations throughout North America, both US and Canada, and we're strategically positioned in a lot of different geographic locations and major industrial hubs. And our companies work together to provide solutions and to engineer solutions for a gigantic, really vast array of industries, everything from life sciences to industrial manufacturing, municipalities, city systems, et cetera. And so we really have our hands in and our solution hats on for just about everything going on in North America behind the scenes. And as a company, like I said, 100 subsidiaries, which means that we have a pretty complex organization. Those 100 subsidiaries are grouped together in about 7 subgroups. We call them operating groups by technology. And within those companies, 100 individual companies, we've got like 100 different ways of doing things, 100 different sales cultures, 100 different sales frameworks that we were kind of all operating in. And across the org, we have over 900 sellers. And so when we were looking at how can we evolve the organization and what can we do? We really were, kind of analyzing our business in 4 key areas that we needed to make an impact on: sales cycles, and understanding and providing some type of framework that was going to fit for all of our different types of sales cycles, the complexity of our organization. How are we going to really roll out a framework and a sales training process and get consultative selling in the hands of all these different sellers across all these different places and companies? Looking at using a consultative selling framework that was going to work for a wide variety of customers and a wide variety of industries, and something that was going to meet all of our sellers where they were and really up level all those sellers' skills across 900 different people, and get them all up to a better place. And so working with the Brooks Group and bringing this consultative selling training in has been really phenomenal, because I think that we found, such a great process that works for the complexity of our organization, as well as, the different wide variety of sales cycles and sales types and sales lengths that we are trying to solve for.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a couple of key kind of threads that we're going to talk about throughout our time together today, which is that complexity of that sales process, the different sales cycles. I know you and I have been talking, some of your sales cycles can run up to a year, as well as the differences of the types of organizations that kind of roll up, the diversity of organization, and then the different tenures of sellers. So a lot of things to kind of solve for in this process. And as I said, spoiler to those of you that are in our audience, we're going to kind of be weaving these threads throughout our conversation today. So when you looked at launching a consultative selling initiative, let's talk about kind of how you went about doing that, what those goals were. You've already kind of mentioned, in partnering with the Brooks Group, you used our impact selling process, but really, again, it's that consultative approach. So let's talk about how you all launched this, put this project together.
Yeah, so when we were first identifying partners and sales methodologies or frameworks that we wanted to, test and try across the organization, what was really important to us was something that we were going to be able to use consistently across all of our brands, all 100 companies, all types of sales cycles. And like you said, some of our sales cycles are pretty complex, upwards, a year or even a few years sometimes, and really, really complex conversations and needs in terms of what the seller needs to be able to do and how they need to be able to work with that buyer. And then we also, on the other side of that, have sales cycles that are a few days and more transactional, more MRO sales processes. And so we needed to equip our sales teams across the org with something that was going to unify our process and our language and give us a consistent framework that fit for all of those different sales processes and all those different customers and all those different lengths of sales. We also have been, working on how we align all of the consultative approach, the framework we're using, with our tools and our tracking, building those steps into our Salesforce instance. And so being able to have a consistent approach with consistent steps across the board allows us to unify all of those back-end systems and the way we're looking at the business as well. I would also say, when we were identifying what we wanted to do with sales training across the board, we didn't want to just roll out sales training across the entire organization all at once, right? That doesn't make any sense. That's such a huge investment. And what if it what if it doesn't work?
Right.
So we wanted to be careful and really strategic. And so we selected a pilot group to roll out our training framework to, and to test and learn and see how it landed. And we identified a group within our org, the automation group, and selected that group because of the wide variety of sales tenure, of experience with using consultative selling. We had some people in that subgroup that had never seen it, never used it, all the way up to some folks who had been through consultative trainings and even impact training in the past. And the automation group sales process is fairly complex and is fairly long. And so we knew that if we could find a sales training that worked for this group, then we could confidently say it will likely work for all of the groups at our organization. So we picked this, I would say we didn't pick the easy route. We didn't pick something where we could like get an early win. We picked something that was going to be a group that was going to be a little bit more rigorous and a little more discerning and give us really great feedback on it. And launching the impact training, launching consultative selling to that group, I think really solidified to us that this was a process and a framework that was really going to work across the org. And this third bullet point here, incorporating manager development and coaching. We can get into this a little bit later too, but what we learned when we first rolled out the training is we were really focused on the seller. We were focused on our sales folks and really enabling that frontline seller and empowering them and up-leveling the selling organization. And what we realized in our pilot is that while the sellers were getting this great training, the managers were kind of coming in behind it and weren't necessarily as equipped with the expertise and the language and the lessons that our sellers had gone through. And we quickly identified that, we really also need to plug in a manager training component. So I would say launching this initiative, we had some great learnings. We had some early successes, and we were able to verify that the training was going to scale and work really well. Now we're on this long-term journey of evolving and upskilling the entire sales organization for consultative selling and really having a true consultative approach, which is really unlocking, for those who have been through the training already, unlocking a lot of opportunities that they did not know that were there, and that they're able to take advantage of now because they have now this consultative approach versus a product approach.
Yeah.
So I'll pause there. What questions can I have?
No, I think that's great. I mean, that sets it up nicely. I think for those of you in our audience, kind of listening and taking notes, if you are considering an implementation of this type, your best practices are right here on the slide, and kind of Rhiannon has really laid them out nicely. Identifying those goals for the sales team, selecting a pilot group, and Rhiannon, to your point, you picked the group that if it works for this group, we can confidently say it will work, across the organization. So you kind of went with a tougher challenge up front, climb that hill, and then it kind of can multiply after that. And then you spoke to the importance of manager development and that coaching follow-up. And as you said, we're going to talk a little bit about that even more later on, because for you all, that was a big lesson learned. That was not something you did up front and learned that was really critical. So folks, your best practices for this type of initiative are right here. One thing I did want to stop and mention, because I neglected to mention it up front, if you have questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat or in the Q&A box. We do have some time at the end for Q&A, but we'll also try to get to these as we go. Again, if you've got questions for Rhiannon or for me as we go, please add those to the chat. We'd also love to hear your comments and observations as we go as well. Now, talking about, because Rhiannon, you mentioned kind of why consultative selling was the approach that you all wanted to go with. The benefits of a consultative approach, really being able to draw out to more business, and you're starting to see the fruits of that. But why was this the right approach for Flow Control Group?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, our sales process in some of our more complex scenarios can be a few years long and can be, millions of dollars of investment for that customer. And so it's really important that we're setting up that relationship and we're setting up that seller and buyer interaction the right way, and not just getting our foot in the door and getting a transactional sale, but like really building a long-term relationship where we are there every step of the way, from that first solution that customer brings in through the entire life cycle of many solutions that we could potentially be offering them. We also, in the automation group in particular, that pilot group that we selected, our sellers are often very highly technical in terms of their background. So those sellers are not necessarily born sellers. Sometimes they're born engineers. Sometimes they're trained applications engineers that have been working on the product side for a long time and then transition into sales. And so what we had was a population of really highly technical, very expert people that were going right to product and performance when they were talking about, talking with customers and going into these selling conversations. And what that did is it unfortunately maybe didn't set up that relationship in the beginning of being a collaborative, beneficial relationship, and sellers weren't necessarily connecting with their buyers the most effective ways. And so with those technical background sellers, what we knew we needed to do was teach them that consultative, like that people approach, that really trusted consultant approach that positions them as trusted advisors and positions them as not just technical experts but real partners in the process. And so I would say anyone on this webinar or anywhere out there, that if you have technical sellers or you have really technical products, really going in with a consultative training and giving folks, enabling them with the best practices around how to truly consult is going to be often revelatory. It's going to be a huge asset, and it's going to help them really evolve the way they're working with customers. I would also say, in terms of consultative selling across the organization, we did have some pockets of excellence already. We had some tenured sellers in that pilot group, and tenured sellers that have gone through the training that were already using that approach, but going through the training has reinforced and reignited the passion around it. It's also allowed them to be peer coaches and allowed them to also share their best practices with the approach, and really building and forging those relationships. And I would say what we've really seen is that now that everybody is speaking that same language and has that same approach around how do we consult, how do we position ourselves as trusted advisors, it has really unlocked a lot of different opportunities, from the way that we're coaching folks and the way we're really targeting coaching around what questions people are asking to build that rapport, targeting coaching throughout the entire process, as well as what we haven't spoken to yet is our cross-selling. And our cross-selling across all of our 100 brands, the opportunity there is like almost endless. So I may work in a brand that specializes in automation, and I can help this industrial manufacturing facility with all of their automation and the robotics, but that facility probably also has air piping and air systems and power systems, and there are countless other places in that manufacturing facility that other FCG companies make solutions for. And so now also having a consultative approach as a seller, I'm uncovering all kinds of needs. Our sellers are uncovering all kinds of needs that they wouldn't have uncovered had they not been going in with consultative questions and really understanding the entire situation and understanding the buyer and understanding the company first before they dive into product solutions. And that's really enabled us to have more of those cross-brand, cross-technology conversations and offer even more comprehensive solutions. So now not only is this seller a trusted advisor in their domain, they're also now a trusted collaborator in connecting the dots and forging those relationships with other solution providers within our organization, which I think has been really cool and was an unintended, I think, perk of laying out a consultative approach across the board. So yeah, it's been it's been excellent. I would highly recommend any sales organization really go through dedicated consultative training.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you've laid out some really several kind of compelling reasons for this, from having very technical sellers to cross-sell, upsell type opportunities, kind of being able to work across divisions, to having different pockets, or maybe an inconsistent approach. You had some kind of with more of a consultative approach and others maybe not. And I'm curious, for our audience out there, are you all having some of these same challenges as you all think about your teams, your sellers, and adopting more of a consultative selling approach? Are these some of the same reasons that you're considering this approach for? And if not, what might those reasons be? We've got Leonardo here in the chat speaking about the technical piece, Rhiannon. Technical engineers can become good outside sales professionals as long as they follow an applicable sales step process that is based on a consultative approach with solutions driven mindset, which is exactly what we've been talking about. Like they've got that product knowledge, that technical knowledge. It's just then kind of giving them the sales skills to wrap around.
And I would say, Leonardo, you're exactly right. I think that our technical background sellers oftentimes are approaching even the sales cycle from a more methodical or process-oriented place versus maybe some of our other background salespeople are more maybe going through based on feel or rapport building. And so having a formula for how to go through that consultative selling framework has been so helpful for those technical sellers to really flex into and feel very comfortable and confident now building the rapport and becoming trusted advisors. I think you're spot on.
So we talked about that consultative approach. Rhiannon, you mentioned kind of becoming that trusted advisor, kind of building those relationships. So let's kind of take a look at what that actually looks like. What are those components of building that consultative relationship? And we've got a diagram here. I'll walk us kind of through it. And then Rhiannon, again, I love your perspective on how this kind of played out at Flow Control Group. In terms of moving those relationships forward with customers, we want to start with a basis of credibility. One of the ways that we do that is through understanding like behavior styles. We happen to use DISC, but really understanding our own way of communicating. And so when sellers understand their own style, and then they can identify that in their customers, they can identify their customer style, they can adapt to their customer style. That really opens up lines of communication. Oftentimes what we find is that really opens up the customer to be willing to have a conversation, to be willing to entertain what the salesperson has to say. It builds rapport. When the seller can then show reliability together, that credibility, that reliability, and then in that exploration of customer wants and needs, putting that first. And we do that through effective questioning. That helps to build trust. And once you build trust, if you can kind of continue, essentially it becomes that loop of keeping customer wants and needs first, that then sustains trust, and it moves that relationship forward. That is the basis of a lot of what we teach in Impact. Obviously, Rhiannon, what your teams went through. But tell me how that really played out with Flow Control Group in terms of building that credibility, deeper questioning strategies.
Yeah, so I would just echo everything that you said first, is that starting with the credibility and moving into reliability, and then really understanding and digging deep into what the customer's needs and wants are from the beginning is it's a best practice. I think that is a little bit, it can feel rigorous, and sometimes it can feel like you are maybe intuiting versus having a defined formula unless you learn this formula. And so I think rolling out this formula across the organization has been extremely helpful in defining how those steps need to be executed and their best practices and really helpful verbiage and helpful language within each of these steps and taking sellers through this consultative training has helped to fill the gaps where someone maybe was intuitively doing something or accidentally had learned something that worked for them in the past, but now had an actual defined process around it and had proven questions. And now they have proven techniques that really work to understand the person, not just the product needs. And I come back to that phrase a lot when I'm talking about sales training is the person and understanding the person and having that almost psychological approach to selling is just as important as having product expertise and being a subject matter expert in that particular technology or that solution that you're providing. And I think that now that we have these formulas, we have these really helpful questions. I know we're going to get into some of those question types in a few slides here. Really being able to articulate and practice those questions and have those role-playing conversations and have those coaching conversations every week post-training has really anchored this people focus and this relationship focus in our sales process where it didn't always exist before. It did exist in some situations, but I think now we're really establishing much more of a culture of that focus. And that trust is so important at FCG, especially because some of these sales processes are very long. In a lot of cases, it's hard to get the foot in the door and it's hard to initiate that sales process and that conversation with a new customer. And, as we are always looking at expanding market share, always looking at, adding new customers to our, to our relationships and to our company, being able to do that really well from the beginning, again, is positioning our sellers as those trusted consultants, as trusted advisors. And it's unlocking huge opportunities across the board in terms of cross-selling, in terms of providing larger solutions. And, even at the beginning, just getting the foot in the door, getting that relationship started on the right foot and showing our buyers that we're here for the bigger picture. We're here for them. We're not just here to sell in a product. We're here to provide a total solution.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We got a comment in on the chat. So Matt was saying that, we've been talking about training highly technical sellers. Matt has the opposite issue. So he has got a highly technical product and less technical sales team.
Sure.
So the sales engineers carry a larger burden than normal on the technical needs.
And I would say we have that as well. We have all variety. And although I've been talking about our technical background sellers a lot, we also absolutely have a population of less technical sales folks. And they have really been able to leverage this consultative approach to uncover at the beginning as many needs, as many wants as possible, so that when they turn around and now involve that sales engineer, that application engineer in the conversation, they have so much more understanding of what the problems are that this customer is encountering, what the needs are for this customer, that when they pull that sales engineer in or they pull that application engineer in, the conversation is so much richer from the beginning, and they're able to, it's like they're starting out a few miles ahead. And it's actually reduced some of those frustrations that you're talking about, Matt, on the sales engineers or the application engineers perspective, because they are being brought in with more information. They, their sales team that's handing off or that's now creating that bridging that gap between customer and sales engineer, they're talking about much better solutions because they've uncovered much more critical needs and have much more information because of those questions that they've asked, and they've done their due diligence in the, these first three bubbles here of this process.
Yeah, that's interesting. You were reading my mind kind of with your comments, because as you were talking, I was like, well, it would seem like that would kind of help relieve that burden on the technical sales engineer, if they can kind of move that process forward a little bit, those better conversations on the part of the seller really can make the sales engineers work a little bit more efficient. Probably helps just the natural relationship between the seller and the engineer as well, in terms of even building trust between the two of them, because that's also very important. So we talked a little bit about questioning strategy. Then Rhiannon, you mentioned this. In terms of uncovering customer wants and needs, which is critical to a consultative process, we look at 4 types of questioning strategies, and we're approaching these from most to least effective. And so going from most consultative to probably most kind of transactional. So if you look at 4 types of questionings, there's needs and emotional wants. So that's what we've been talking about, uncovering that surface need, but also the underlying why, the emotional, the emotion behind the sale, the why, what is that driver? That's the most effective. The next most effective would be uncovering needs and the buying process. So understanding how the customer is going to make that decision to purchase, incredibly important in complex selling environments. Third most would be product-based questions. So uncovering just enough information, just very product-based, that you can provide a quote or specifications for a solution. And then finally, asking introductory questions and then kind of going into that product pitch. These are 4 types of questioning strategies, as I've mentioned, most effective to least effective. What we have found is that more technical sales teams tend to focus on those product-based questions. They tend to kind of, because that's where their knowledge is. So Rhiannon, is this kind of what you have seen in terms of the before for your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are some training methods out there that are focused entirely on product and, focused on how to ask the questions that are going to connect directly to the product that you're selling. And I think, sure, those are somewhat effective, but at our organization, uncovering as much information as possible is going to really allow us to present, really comprehensive solutions. I have an anecdote that's very specific to this scenario, actually. With that pilot group, we did the initial training, and then we met every week for 6 weeks after the training, virtually, and discussed best practices and discussed pain points and coached each other. And we had a salesperson, John, who was a newer salesperson to the organization, had a technical background. And he said in one of the first coaching follow-up meetings, he said, I have had the biggest revelation in this process that I was going in, and he was really focused on 3 product-based questions. He was going in with, kind of like an end in mind and what product he was trying to sell in. And so he's asking questions like to try to lead to that conversation and lead to that purchase. And he wasn't getting any traction at all. And within the first few weeks post training and learning how to really start with the needs and wants, and through the training, I mean, the training has a lot of, the training that we did the 2-day training, has a lot of exercises around what questions to ask, how to ask questions to identify needs and wants, like what does that really mean? Also, how to identify what type of buyer persona you might have in front of you, and then how to connect with that buyer persona, and then uncover those needs and wants in an effective way, and how to flex your questions based on that buyer. He started using that right away and was able to get not just his foot in the door, but was actually able to engage with and book meetings with prospects that he had never been successfully able to get meetings with before. And it was because he was approaching it completely differently. And so, he was super excited. I was very excited about that. I mean, it was a real quick win, and and he is probably one of our strongest advocates now for the training and the impact that the training's had. So, again, just to reiterate, the needs and wants conversations and the exercises around how to uncover that and how to do that and what kind of questions to ask. It gives sellers a really good database. It like gives them a really good place to start and kind of takes the guesswork out of it and enables them with a I would say really effective process.
Yeah, great. Okay. So kind of piggybacking on that, because you, Rhiannon, are saying you tried this, your team's tried that, you've got success stories of sellers that really are focusing on those level 1, 2 questions, right? The uncovering wants and needs and really understanding the buying process. So our research, it has shown that successful teams are 60% more likely to understand underlying wants and needs and the customer's buying process. So focusing on those top 2 questions. When we say successful teams, we're talking about those who met or exceeded their revenue goals in the previous year. And that stat and more information on this is in our study, our sales leader trend study, best practices of high performance sales teams. So if you'd like more information there, check out that report. Essentially, this questioning works and it does contribute to the success of teams. And then we talked about really empowering sellers really at all levels. Rhiannon, you mentioned having that seller that kind of came to you and said, hey, this stuff is working. And so when you think about using a consultative approach and implementing that, how does that work at Flow Control? Like, how were you able to really work with sellers that were brand new versus those that were tenured?
Yeah, so the whole consultative approach is about great communication. I mean, I think that's the kind of the foundation of it, strategic and strong communication. And so that counts internally as well for our best practices. So maybe starting at the bottom bullet point here, just starting with and rolling out a consistency across the board. So we're now all using the same language. We've all been through the same process. We all understand the selling steps. We all understand the questions and know the questions to ask that are built into like consultative selling. And so having that common language and that common approach has been really helpful to then reinforce. We're all saying they were speaking the same language around sales. And so when we are coaching, we're doing peer coaching, we're doing behind the scenes coaching, managers are coaching teams, we're all talking about the same thing. We can reference different parts of the buying cycle. We can reference different language. We all know what we're talking about. Also, that coaching is the thing that's going to make the learning sticky, right? So you can have a training event, but if you really want learning and behavior changes to happen, you have to reinforce that. And I would say the reinforcement has been really critical here with this process and ensuring that we have strong reinforcement approaches. So it's peer coaching, it's creating opportunities for peers to coach each other, defining what that looks like, whether it's setting people up, setting individual sellers up to have touch bases on a regular basis to connect with each other and share best practices and coach each other and offer expertise to each other, having dedicated coaching sessions where we get together once a week or biweekly to talk just about impact with whether it's a manager who's been through the training or even a coach from the Brooks Group to reinforce that. One of the things the Brooks Group provided was some great playbooks to reinforce the learning and reinforce the coaching with some exercises and questions to use weekly as we're going through those coaching instances. And continuously coming back to the content and reinforcing and reiterating the consultative approach and what questions we can ask and how, coming back to that conversation, are we really uncovering true wants and needs? Did we start there? What wants and needs maybe still exist to uncover? What is this buyer's persona? How can we connect with this buyer even more effectively? And going through all that then leads to this first bullet point, which is like, that's a true boost in confidence because now people are practicing, they have a framework, they have a formula that works, they're getting to see the that that works now. They're hearing from their peers how it's working in their situations. They're getting to, talk through scenarios and get advice from each other. And that is, not only have we up-leveled the skill, we've up-leveled the confidence across the board, especially for newer sellers, because it's, for a newer seller, sometimes it can, can feel a little mysterious, or maybe you were trained to just focus on the product, and now it's like we're like, handing over the that magic formula, that magic book for how it can work, and how you can really get to know people and um, and and uncover and understand what they need and then provide that solution. And it feels so good to provide a solution and get the yes, and then it works really well. And now you've got a buyer who's like so excited to work with you again, because what other solutions can we find? What other problems can we solve? And, that feather in the cap, I think is, it's really great for the buyer or the seller today. And it's also really great for that seller's career at the company.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a great kind of way to talk about the benefits, in terms of today versus even future looking. A couple of questions that have come in, and I think a good place to kind of address them. So Kim is asking how the solution was rolled out. Like, so from a high level perspective, stages, topics, timing, length. So as you think about rolling out consultative selling within your organization, we talked about you had a pilot group, so you had a select group to kind of do the first run moving forward. In terms of the actual, let's say, training, what did that look like for FCG?
Yeah, so we started with that pilot group. We had one sales training for that initial pilot group. It's a 2-day sales training. We learned pretty quickly that, we didn't train the managers. We need to also train the managers. So the next sales training session that we had for another group in that same automation sector, we brought the sales managers in as well. The sales managers also went through that seller training along with the sellers. And then we did a follow-up sales manager training. And if I were to go back and coach myself on how to roll this out, if I could redo it, I would start with that. I would ensure that the sales managers and even prioritize the sales managers in the seller training alongside the sellers, and then do that dedicated sales manager training. And then the training event was the kickoff to a 6 or 8 week reinforcement journey. So the training event happened, let's call that week 0. And then starting on week 1, the sales manager or the coach from the Brooks group, we did it both ways, hosted weekly reinforcement touchpoint calls with that team, because we're pretty decentralized. So we have sellers all over the place. If magically everyone could be in person, we definitely would have done in person. We did the training in person, but the reinforcements, those sessions we did on Teams, and we had the sales leader or the coach from Brooks Group. They would start with, okay, here's our topic for this week. Let's talk about, what successes did you have last week? Let's dig deeper into this particular one item from the training. Let's talk about uncovering wants and needs. Let's talk about just the questions you've been asking. And, we do some group sharing. We do some group revisiting of the material from class. And then we'd break those folks up into small breakout groups in the Teams meeting. So break them off in pairs of 2 or 3 to talk to each other and coach each other through maybe some roadblocks that they were hitting or some situations they were encountering. And then we come back to that larger group and discuss what had been talked about in those breakout groups and share best practices and highlight good coaching. So that was one way that we we implemented, like that's the timeline, really, the structure. After that 8 weeks of reinforcement coaching, now it's still embedded into those regular sales calls, those regular sales meetings that those managers are hosting. But I would say a dedicated impact or consultative coaching meeting once a week, if you can do it, is going to really not just reinforce the concepts, but also help people to work through their specific situations and their specific scenarios and coach each other. And if you're in L&D, you would you probably have heard that phrase of, teaching is learning. And so, being able to teach each other is then reinforcing that learning and making that learning sticky for the teacher, the coach as well. So the peer coaching, I think, is really important. We also, now we're looking at how to scale it through the organization. So identifying, now that we know it works, identifying who are the sales managers that we want to plug in. And then, so we're plugging in those sales managers first into training, and then identifying which sales folks on those sales managers teams we're going to prioritize in training, and, just cascading it out. I would say based on a combination of factors, like who's going to benefit from it the most, who's going to get the biggest results, but with a 1 degree of difference, a 1 degree of upskilling, who's going to get the biggest and best bang for their buck by coming to training, who's going to be really willing and able to come to training, who's going to really receive it well. And so we're factoring all those into our plan for how to scale this through the rest of the organization.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Kim, to add on to that as well on your question there, topics. This training covered really the full sales process and implementing the full sales process. So Rhiannon and I have been talking a lot about building trust, building rapport, adapting to behavior styles, asking good questions, the best types of questions to ask. In the training itself, we covered prospecting, pre-call planning, again, that building trust, asking good questions, presenting your solution in an effective manner, managing objections, asking for the business. So really that whole foundational sales process, those were the topics covered. There was also a question about peer coaching, and Rhiannon, I think you pretty well covered that. You had the peer coaching as part of that reinforcement, also using some of your tenured salespeople as well to pairing them up and leveraging that experience.
Yeah, we did. We did in some cases have a very strategic approach to maybe pairing a really tenured salesperson who's really good at consultative selling already with a newer salesperson who was at the beginning of their journey. And in some cases, pairing those folks up as more of like a mentor and mentee relationship as well, and just encouraging them to meet on a regular basis, like, call each other, have a biweekly standing touch point where they could talk about it and talk through situations that are arising and offer feedback and offer some, potential advice or ways to handle things. And so I think it's about identifying what's going to work for the person and what's going to work for that unique particular situation. And when you consider each person that's going through the training and what they might need to reinforce and to make it really work, I think that's when you really uncover big growth. I love a really systematic approach. I tend to go to really, consistent, systematic across the board. But when it comes to reinforcement coaching, honoring where someone's at and what they need, and then what value someone else can provide, I think is really the better way to do it.
Yeah, that's great insight. Like finding that balance between the system and the process, and just kind of the nuance of just meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So in terms of results, again, you've implemented this consultative approach, kind of talking through what that's actually done for your organization. We at the Brooks Group have a standard measurement process that we use to help clients track results of their initiative. And so we look at post-training metrics, right? And so these first two metrics here, 25% increase in consultative selling skills, 30% increase in following a consistent process. That's really about the confidence. Those are measures coming out of our post-training survey. Rhiannon, we've talked about really building confidence in your sellers, and when they believe they can do it, they're more apt to use those new skills. So 2 metrics there. At 6 months post-training, we do an ROI survey to get a sense of what the business impact, the application and business impact has been for the organization. These are 2 metrics here that came out of that pilot cohort. 6 months post-training, they are reporting an 18% average increase in conversion rate and a 6% average decrease in sales cycle length. Excuse me. And I know that you all too, Rhiannon, are looking at metrics. Obviously, you've got a very long sales cycle. So what are some things that you're doing, within FCG to really kind of measure and track progress?
Yeah, so we have implemented, we've built the impact steps, we've built the selling steps into our Salesforce instance so we can really track where people are, and we can have really good data around, conversion rates and getting through the sales cycle as defined in the training. We are really, really honing in on a few key metrics because they are the most important to our organization right now. Cross-selling, and so how many sellers or how many brands are connected with a particular customer. Also looking at number of prospects that then are converted into meetings, so that prospect to meeting conversion is really important. Of course, looking at sales closing, and sales numbers over the long term. But like you said, our sales process for this group is particularly long. And so even at 6 months out, we don't necessarily see the true quantifiable impact of the training as we will in a year or even 18 months. But I'll say the 6% average decrease in sales cycle length, I mean, that in and of itself is pretty significant. If a sales cycle is a year long or 18 months long, reducing it by 6 or 8% can be pretty significant and can mean a lot to the organization. Yeah. And the conversion rate here, 18% average increase in conversion rate, that's a pretty significant impact. I mean, just in the first 6 months to convert 18% more prospects into meetings, to convert 18% more meetings into closed sales. I mean, that's incredible. And, when our average sale can be upwards, a few $100,000, upwards of $1 million, I mean, that's a pretty important number, is tracking conversion. So we'll be tracking, I mean, we love data here at FCG. We're an engineering company, so we're going to track every data point and metric possible, but we're really going to hone in on conversion rates, prospects into meetings into closed sales, and then the sales length, I think, is going to be really important to us.
Yeah, great. All right. I want to take a minute and just encourage folks to enter Q&A. I see that we do have some questions coming in, and we will address those. But also just want to put that out to the audience. Any additional comments, Q&A, please feel free to add those either to the chat or to the Q&A box. So as we look at a good process, it really does reflect the important elements of a relationship. And I think this is a nice summary of not only consultative selling, but Rhiannon, what you all at FCG are looking to do with this type of initiative, right? So hope and optimism over the relationship, the ability to build trust, the ability to adapt to different individuals, different buyer styles, understanding your own disc style, being able to adapt, learning more, uncovering those needs and wants, which then allows you to go high, wide, and deep, and sell even more, and to be able to sell on value. And really that generates additional sales, it generates referrals, it builds long-standing relationships. It allows for cross-selling, and which was a huge initiative for you all. Again, thoughts on this as you reflect on what we've accomplished together at FCG so far. As you look at this, what are your kind of thoughts in terms of moving forward?
Yeah, I just want to keep reinforcing, with my team, with our sales organization, that we're in this for the long haul. So we're in this for the long haul with our customers. We're in this for the long haul with our solutions. Not only do we want to provide solutions that are going to last a long time, we want to have customer relationships that are going to last a long time and have those customers coming back to us again and again. And by starting out the right way and building the strength of the relationship, and it not just to be about this transactional product or this one-time sale, but really the life cycle of that entire customer relationship with the FCG organization. That if we start there and we always keep that in the forefront of our minds, we are always going to win. And that goes so much farther than, being the best priced solution on the market, or going after sales in a tactical way. That being a true trusted advisor and having a really strong relationship is going to overcome, some of that competitor poaching, or the market conditions, and it's gonna allow us to weather any storm and to grow through any type of economic condition as well. And I think that we are really setting our sellers up for success and long-term internally as well. A seller who gets to go through this level of training and unlock these really great best practices and great techniques for being successful, that person is going to really value the relationship they have with our company as well. And that's going to go a long way with employee retention and employee longevity, and having that trusted relationship internally as well. So the relationship is the key, and having a structured training around how to build that relationship, I think, impacts all the relationships for that seller.
Yeah. I love that that call out, Rhiannon, in terms of we've been talking about building trust with customers. But what you're also saying is that these types of initiatives, consultative selling and rolling out this type of process, actually can help build trust between the seller and their organization, right? You're contributing to retention, and ultimately that that pays off in the long run as well. And yeah, again, the cross-selling opportunities here. I think there's just been a lot of potential reasons for doing consultative selling. We've talked about the technical sellers, and adding that consistency, that can cross-selling opportunity, and now the retention of employees. So we have a couple of resources here for you if you are interested. These two QR codes on the left, if you're interested in our assessments. So we talked about behavior styles, DISC styles, understanding for sellers, understanding their own style as well as the styles of their customers. The assessments are one piece of that. And then impact selling. This is the consultative approach that Flow Control Group implemented. So if you'd like more information on that as well, feel free to click on those QR codes. Looking at questions, so Jody had put a question in in the Q&A. What does the reliability circle look like? What are customers wanting? And is it consistency in the relationships? So Jody is referring to the diagram from earlier in our session when we talked about credibility, reliability, understanding customer wants and needs, and that sort of thing. So I will give my thoughts on that, and Rhiannon, I'd love your perspective as well. When I think about reliability, it's following up with the customer, being doing what you say you are going to do, being accessible to the customer. We actually did a survey. We were working with a client a couple of years ago. We actually surveyed their customers to understand what was most important to their customer base in terms of differentiators. Why did they choose to work with this particular client? And one of the top differentiators was just their seller accessibility. Their sellers returned phone calls. They followed up promptly. They were easy to access. And so when I think reliability, that is kind of the perspective that I assign to reliability. Rhiannon, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, same thing. In the training, there is a whole section about, saying what you're going to do and doing what you say, and ensuring that you are really being consistent in your process. Because if you're consistent in your process itself, if you have a process you're following, fewer things fall through the cracks, and you're able to really ensure you're giving the best service to that customer. And there's a lot of talk about pre-call planning and then the follow-up step. And the pre-call
Yeah.
planning and the follow-up step, that's behind the scenes. And I think that those are the things that fall off a lot of the times when a seller is really busy or, is out there in the field, road warrior. And so focusing on the pre-call planning and focusing on the follow-up are going to ensure that you're always reliable. And that's such an important component to building trust, and the customer knowing they can rely on you when you say you're going to do something, or when you're going to, say you're going to send something or deliver some kind of information. How you operate, they are going to reasonably assume is how the company operates. And so
Yeah.
if they can rely on you, they can rely on the company.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent points. Pedro, when and how can I be sure I am connected to the client? And so I'm going to assume, Pedro, you mean like, how do you know when you've built trust with a client? And so I'll take a stab and answer this. And again, Rhiannon, love your thoughts as well. To me, it is when the client opens up to you, is willing to share, answer your questions, is willing to share deeper information. When the client calls you and asks for your opinion or your advice on a topic, and maybe it's not even directly related to a product that you sell, like, maybe it's because you've demonstrated some industry expertise or that kind of thing. And so to me, those are the signs that trust is being built. And again, Rhiannon, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I would piggyback on that and say that every buyer is going to be a little different. Every customer is going to be a little different
Mhm.
based on their own persona or their particular disc style. And so if you are also following the process, you're following the buying process, you can identify if a buyer has now moved from step 0 to step 1, step 1 to step 2, where they are in their buying process as well as where we are in our selling process. If things are starting to move, I would say that that's now when we're starting to see that trusted relationship is there, even if we're not getting indicators in other ways, or even if that buyer tends to be a little bit less maybe forthcoming or relationship building. Now on the opposite side of that, of course, we're going to have some buyers, some customers, some clients that are, it's really easy to read, and you can see that you've made the connection, and you can see that now that the conversation's flowing, the questions are being answered, the meetings are being booked, and you can confidently say that the connect is there.
Great. Thank you. All right. And one more question. So Marina is asking, as we speak about the results of training, did you measure the win rate percentage change after training, and whether a deal volume average grows? So from the Brooks Group perspective, in our survey, we do ask questions about, what we ask is how their conversion rate has changed before and after training. And then we also ask them to assign an attribution to the training. So, what percentage of that change in conversion rate do you attribute to the training? And then we do also ask about, average sale amount, as well as change in sales cycle.
And those are also things that we're measuring long term. And so with our long
Yes.
sales cycle, with these initial training groups, we're going to have to give a little bit more time to see what the true win rate percentage increase is, but we're measuring it for the group that has gone through the training, and then also contrasting that with the sellers who have not been through training, so we can really also account for market trends and account for season trends as well. So trying to get as much data as possible. We love data, so we are going to measure every single data point that we possibly can. And then I saw a question from Barry about what CRM software we're using, and what Office software, and how we've possibly integrated this into that. And the answer is everything. With 100 companies, we have like 100 different versions, but we are unifying. Salesforce is our primary CRM. We also do use HubSpot in some instances, but Salesforce is our primary. And we've built in the selling steps, we've built in the impact steps into Salesforce. And so we actually have that nomenclature being used. And so when a seller or an inside sales rep or anybody enters anything into Salesforce, it's now categorizing based on the impact steps. And we primarily use Microsoft as our Office products, and we use Teams, and so we have Teams integration with Salesforce, and we are tracking meetings, and we're tracking customer information, et cetera, and integrating both of those things. And we use a variety of other systems as well. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. We can talk systems all day because we have such a wide variety of them. And we have a really great team working on always evolving how we gather our intelligence, how we gather our data points, and what we do with that, and how we turn that into actual change and growth.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rhiannon. We have come to the end of our time. And again, I want to thank everyone here for joining us. Thank you for the questions and the comments. Rhiannon, thank you so much for sharing your experience and all of your best practices, words of wisdom. We really do appreciate it. It has been so much fun having this conversation with you. And I look forward to the opportunity to do it again. Again, want to thank everyone for joining us, and we will see you on our next webinar.